So welcome to the part of the agenda of our Lifeboat Academy 2024 charrette, where we hear back from each of the guilds. And to get started or to reacclimate ourselves, again, want to bring the land in and remind us that we are all in a place on the globe, and it is that land that connects us all. And so when we pause to acknowledge the land, we are acknowledging more than some lines on a map. We are acknowledging the interconnection of all living things, from the little microbiota that make the soil what it is, up to the great redwoods and from whales down to mites, and how we are part of that web of being. And in acknowledging that, we also acknowledge a debt of gratitude to the indigenous cultures of the world who have kept that absolute knowledge alive for us, at great cost to themselves. And so we acknowledge an obligation of care and of righting wrongs where they have happened, and wrongs have happened. So it's acknowledging that through the best of intentions, harm has been caused, and that when we see harm, it is our job to heal harm and do what we can to heal our relationships with indigenous communities, with each other, with people across any kind of divide, and with all of our more than human relations. And so I will specifically acknowledge the WSÁNEĆ, on whose territory I currently reside, and who I long to become a good neighbor, a good partner, a good ally, in the emergence of the WSÁNEĆ. So with that, I encourage us all to acknowledge the territory on which we are and the traditional keepers of that territory, and to aspire to be good keepers in that lineage. And we want to take a moment to go over our agreements about how we want to work together. And I will go over to the Miro board. If I can find it. Hang on. And so we'll quickly, again, the agreements are always offered in the spirit of proposal. The question that we need to answer is, what do you need to be present and show up today? And we offer a few agreements because we've found in our experience for them to be pretty useful. But once I talk through those agreements, we'll go around the circle and give everyone a chance to say, can you live with them? And is there anything that you would like to add, or any elaboration you would like to make? And so I'll start by saying that we adhere to the 7 principles of sociocracy, and we do so because in our experience they work. And if we ask ourselves, what do we need to be able to collaborate, the 7 principles really address, in my experience at least, address the real roots that we need to be able to work well together. And in terms of specific agreements of how we want to be with each other, a reminder that we're all in this together, and that includes in this session. So we all share responsibility for keeping the circle and keeping the space working and functioning as best it can for all of us. A reminder that you have choice, and choices have consequences. So no one is here, this is a non-coercive space. No one is here to tell anyone else what to do. And we all get to make choices, and we also then have to be responsible for the choices that we make. An encouragement to lead with curiosity, kindness, patience, compassion, and gentleness. Again, we encourage that not because it's some sort of moral thing, but because it really works. It's actually the easiest way of combining our energies together in a way that helps us all and doesn't harm us. And along with that curiosity is listening for understanding, opening yourself up to seeing things in a different way, understanding things in a different way. And with that, encouragement also to speak your own truth, speak what is true for you in your experience, knowing that other people may have different experiences that are equally true. And that's also part of the both and, not either or. And also saying not either or is kind of an either or, making you choose between both and either or. So sometimes actually either or, but mostly both and. And have fun, find the humor, keep things light, be playful, and in part it's we don't want a bright side, so we can talk about heavy feelings, we can talk about negative experiences, we can talk about challenges and fears. That's all fair and legitimate for the conversation. But even when talking about heavy things, we can bring a lightness to it. We can leaven it with some humor and some kind humor. And so this is really about finding the space around things, and a sense of humor is a sense of perspective. So those are our agreements. And the circle, as I see it right now, is Roland, Ronnie, Barbara, Sandra, Heather, Linda, April, Becca. I'll type that into the chat. And as we go around, feel free to also do just a hi. If I guess we've already had a chance to kind of introduce ourselves to each other. So can you live with these agreements? And is there anything that you need to add? Roland, over to you.
Thanks for that. And I can live by the agreements. I am glad to live by the agreements. And there's lots that I could add, but that would just be for fun. This is good. Over to, who's after me, Sandra?
Ronnie.
Ronnie.
I am also good with these agreements and I have nothing to add. Over to Barbara.
Thank you for sharing the principles and the agreements with us again, Ben. And I welcome all of them and have nothing to add. Over to Sandra.
Thank you. Hi, everyone, again. And I appreciate the opportunity just to check in and be mindful of the group spirit and goodwill that we're creating here today. Thank you. And over to Heather.
You're muted, Heather.
Yeah, I definitely accept the agreements. I don't have anything to add. I just maybe make a note for myself that I don't have to understand and take all of this in. I'm in the place I'm in. I'm a little bit overwhelmed with the whole mirror thing, and it's new to me, and I just want to stay with that rather than disconnect. And I don't know who's
Linda.
Linda, okay.
I don't have anything to add. I think it's wonderful that you have these principles, and I may have something to say later about sociocracy in general, but right now I think it's really great that you remind us what these agreements are, and so I'm cool. Nice to be here. And April, I hand it to you.
Thanks. I accept these agreements and have nothing to add except to reinforce the ability to have fun. We can probably never have too much fun. We're a group of serious people who try to come to grips with serious things. And so fun is good. And over to Ben. No, Becca.
Yep, I'm good with the agreements, and just want to second or support what Heather, what you said about overwhelm. And it's not so much the mirror that's happening for me as just like, I don't actually know what a lot of this means in practice, and so my mind keeps wanting to go there. But I think it's like self-compassion is part of the agreement of compassion, right? So thank you. Over to Ben.
Yeah, I and I want to say that we want to support and you know, kudos for recognizing the overwhelm, and we will do what we can. We're trying part of the and yes, relax into it, because part of the overwhelm might be that we're trying to deliver messages on multiple channels. So pretty much anything on the Miro board, we will speak into the circle. So if you're visual, the Miro board is there. If you're more verbal, you could just close your eyes and listen. And yeah, we're trying to provide different options, and it's a little bit like, you know, the blind ones and the elephant. We're touching into different aspects of it, but we're trying to get to that thing that we're shaping in the middle. And part of letting things take the time that they take is to let that center emerge. So yeah, kindness to self all around, and likewise, I will try to provide a little signposting for how this all works, or how we think this works. We do something I call Russian doll planning, which is the idea that plans have a value in orienting us and trying to determine. Our process is aim, act, reflect. And the reflection is, after you've done some work, what can you learn from it? What worked well that you want to do more of? What didn't work so well that you want to let go of? So you reflect on that, and then you create your aim. And your aim is, okay, what's the best we can do now with available resources, given what we know, given what we've learned? What do we think the best we can do is? And then we try it. And that's the experiment. And in trying it, then we have another opportunity to reflect how'd that go, and to refine that experiment again moving forward. And that process, aim, act, reflect, we do at a global level in my life. You know, what's my aim? And we do that at an annual level. That's what we're here to do with the charrette. So for 2024, what did we learn from 2023? And how do we put that into a goal for 2024? And then we also do that at a seasonal level. So once we have our 2024 plan, it's okay, what are we going to do now? What are we going to do in the next couple of months? And then we revisit those seasonal plans periodically 3 times between now and the next annual plan. And then within that seasonal plan, we call them huddles, or we call them sprints, where we say, okay, in the next week or so, kind of when the rubber hits the road, what are the tasks that have to happen? And so by having the 2024 plan is going to be somewhat ambivalent, it's going to be like a North Star. It's going to orient us in the general direction we need to go. It's not going to give us what we need to do on Tuesday, but we'll get there by breaking that down into the seasonal plan, and then the seasonal plan into the sprint. So all we really need to know as we move forward is, what are we working on in the next week or two? And this process gives us a context and a frame of reference, so that when we're making choices about what to do in the next week or two, we have a fairly good idea that it's the best we can do at the moment. So hopefully that adds, it is going to be a little fuzzy right now, and that's okay, because we're just establishing that direction. And then right now is actually when we start to focus that in to what we're going to do. So does that make sense? Is that good enough? Good enough for now? All right. So what we're going to do is just make a little space for each of the guilds to report back on the meetings that happened this week. I'm going to work a little bit as the MC. So I'm just going to line us up and create the space for Guild 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 for the people who had been at that meeting to just give us a quick summary. What's the takeaway? Especially, you know, what was the gist of the conversation, and what's that mean for the 2024 focus? And to help, I will be sharing the sort of the short form of the driver statement for each of the guilds. So we'll have each of the guilds present. I'm going to suggest that we have all of the guilds present and then we have questions for clarification, because what happens in some of the other guilds may shape your understanding of what happens in the earlier guilds. So with that in mind, is there anyone who wants to speak about the Heartwork and Philosophy Guild and some of the takeaways from that meeting? And just raise your hand, April.
I do, but I don't want to be the only one from that group that speaks, because we certainly co-created and had quite great conversations. I was sorry when that meeting was over. I want to say that most organizations don't pay attention to this stuff, and that what the Heartwork and Philosophy Guild can be is a wellspring for emotional intelligence, and to help us cultivate it, recognize it, grow it, and put it into action. And we all have those potentials, but this is a way to let it come to life, I believe. And so I believe this guild is the emotional heart, not the physical pumping blood heart, but the emotional heart and the emotional field in which we try to work relationally, and where we try to deal with the realities of work and of people's lives, I would say. And there's certain steps that we've thought are important so that we can keep the agency of all of us, keep it as high as possible, and again, keep conflict minimized. We recognize conflict is always there because we're humans doing human stuff, but there are ways to manage it and to call it forward and work with it. And that's all I want to say, except I believe that Roland and I kind of volunteered to take some sort of role within this, although we haven't defined that much. And over to somebody else, possibly Roland.
Yeah, who else is anybody else interested in speaking to Heartwork and Philosophy and what we talked about at the meeting? I saw Linda first and then Becca.
I think the only thing that I would add to what April said is that I kind of see it as being conscious, or the process, I can't even speak this morning, the process of becoming conscious of the culture we're co-creating together. Mostly in organizations, no one ever does that. And that's too bad, because it's the culture that actually leads to the results that we get. If the culture isn't working, then we're not going to be able to work well together. So if we can provide those times as we go through the goals, where we're actually getting to know each other, we're working things out between us because we all bring different perspectives, as we've said, then suddenly we become a greater whole than just, the summation of us as individuals. So I look at it as kind of a conscious cultural co-creation with everyone. Thank you. I'm done.
Very cool. Over to you, Becca.
Yeah, and I was thinking as we were meeting about the overlap between this and governance and the sort of immune system function of like attending to conflicts as they arise, and how one of the roles that maybe we could fill, or the functions that we could fill, is providing like a traditionally called vibes watcher or witness kind of process attention in meetings, although it's so baked into the way things already happen that may not be needed. But and I feel like this is really one of the incredible strengths of this effort that distinguishes it from a lot of other efforts that may have similar external goals in the world. I mean, not that I have participated in that many of them, but there's just so many, so much of a need to, like, if what needs to go into the lifeboat is the seeds we want to preserve and the hope for the future, to me, it's like also we want to preserve and continue to develop the best of human cultures.
Mhm. Rohan.
I hope I'm not introducing a completely new idea that the guild hasn't spoken about, but I think I would summarize that as we're knowledge keepers for essentially for the agreements, and the agreements are the bedrock of the organization and how we decide to work together. And this is where the overlap that the Hard Work and Philosophy Guild has with all of the other guilds, that we become the reference point for the meaning, the meaning making of the project. So I just wanted to add that in.
Mhm.
I'm
Yes.
done.
Very cool. All right. So I think we've heard from Hard Work and Philosophy, and I've written down there's some really good phrases that have come up in this that I have noted on paper and pencil, and we'll figure out where that fits into the documentation. All right. Next up, principles and governance. Who would like to speak to that? Oh, don't make me go first. Somebody dive in.
I'll speak, but I don't want to always be the first speaker or the last speaker. um, I think this is a guild that is full of ethic seeking in a way, seeking how to do equitable decision making, seeking how to keep track of things that need to be tracked throughout. Somewhat we've called it the regulatory system, and somewhat it is, and the immune system, and perhaps on the edge of the permeable boundary of us and everything else. It's where sociocracy comes in as a way of organizing work and as a way of upholding more than democratic principles, I believe. And that's why I like to be involved in sociocratic processes. So on to somebody else.
Barbara.
Thanks for taking the intro lead on that, April. I was just reflecting back to that one meeting that we had, and I remember an element of the not sure what the right verb is here, maybe trackers, like the identifier. Perhaps it was the identifier of risks. Just trying to remember more about that. I think just identifying the risks, what they are, and then that is embedded in that context of consent and agreement. Not agreeing a safe space, and then having that context of agreements, and how we navigate what Ben said about being responsible, taking consequences, being aware of the consequences of our action, knowing that there will be harm. We can't guarantee no risk or no harm, and then acting in accordance with the agreements to navigate that when it happens. I think that's all I want to add at this moment.
Does anyone else want to chime in?
A quick chime. Did anybody mention the experimenting? This one of the legs of this guild, as well as to reinforce the aim, act, reflect, and the small scale experimentation.
Yeah, very cool. Any other points? I think I want to because this is also, as we're going through it again, there's a lot of overlap between heart work and the principles in governance. And I think that the differentiation, it really is the heart work. It's about love, the wellspring of emotional intelligence and the agreements. What do we need to be able to show up? And then this is really that process of AMAC, reflect, and continuous improvement. So they have a real close relationship, but they do have different functions. So, in a way, the principles is about creating the experiment, and that's sort of like trying to be objective. What do you think you're trying to accomplish? How do you think you're going to get there? How do we know if it's going to work? And so it's attempting to be a little bit more procedural, whereas the heart work is, and let's check in. Does that feel all right? How is that working? So there's definitely a connection, but I think there is that nice, there is a different functionality to each of them. Anything else that anybody wants to add? Becca?
I guess
Oh, sorry, Becca had her hand up first.
I studied for a while with in a somatic leadership coaching system, and the teacher of that, Richard Strozzi Heckler, I think he maybe got this out of Aikido, I'm not sure, but he talks about head space, heart space, 1 space, 2 space, and 3 space. And 1 space is sort of like narrower, focused head space, thinking stuff through, kind of like what you were saying about the aim act. And heart space is more attending to the emotions, but it's supposed to be like inclusive of the head. Like when you step back into heart space, you can also still see the cognitive stuff. And then the 3rd space is more like a wider sensing into patterning, and that also is inclusive of the heart and the head. And he talks about, and there's always more beyond that. So I don't know, that just came to mind as another lens that we could use to navigate some of these boundaries.
Awesome. Over to you, Linda.
Yeah, I think that actually gets at what I'm beginning to feel, which is these guilds are not set based on the people who are in them as much as they are ways of thinking about a process that any of us might be in. Is that correct? Because otherwise I'm just like, because I don't know how you can separate these things. We have a task to do, and it probably relates to both being in a heart space initially, and then we may need to go to the head space to actually make a decision, and then we carry it out and we come back and we reflect on it. But it's not just, okay, the heart space people over here and the head over here. So we're all involved with really many of these guilds. Maybe we separate into guilds if we sense we need to update some sort of process within each. Is that a good way of thinking about them?
Yeah, and there are also sort of regular responsibilities that make more sense in one than the other. Sort of like, here's a good example. We have a morning circle. Somebody has to lead the morning circle. That's heart work. We have a morning huddle. That's about who's doing what. That's something that the principals guild is responsible for, making sure that there's the seasonal planning. So it's in terms of some of those day-to-day functions, it also, who makes sure that we do this, who makes sure that we do that. But yeah, I agree. I think it's almost like each guild is a lens, and we can all be, and maybe there's somebody like the keeper of the lens, like Becca was talking about, the vibes watcher, is there's somebody that is saying, I've got this lens, and I'm going to make sure that when we do something, we're going to look through this lens a little bit. So yeah, we really want it to be all woven together, but it's just helpful to sort of
Got it.
Divide it up a bit. Awesome. All right. Any other thoughts for principles and governance? All right, moving on to finance and legal. Anyone want to talk to this?
Go for it, Ben.
Well, I was going to say, I think this one is in
It's-
some ways, I think what we talked about is that there's a lot of interconnection between this work and what else is happening in the other guilds, but in some ways it's the easiest to kind of keep separate. And it really is we need to have that frontal cortex working to, make sure we're dotting our I's and crossing our T's and paying our bills. And there's a lot of ways in which it overlaps, but it is pretty clean. Not nearly as complicated as the enmeshment that happens between principles and hard work, for example. Any
Yeah,
other?
and I see it as very much a functional thing. And we are in some ways quite task oriented. This needs to be done. These people need to be contacted. Um, we need to follow up on these connections that we have made. There's some analytical, we need to analyze like what, where do we go next with this? Give Ben feedback on anything that you are kind of like, I'm going to say insecure. I don't think you're insecure, but something that you're not certain of and you just want some feedback on. So yeah, I think this circle is very different than the others. And some of the elements of the other circles, of course, play into the practice. Because we adhere to all the other things too as well. Anyway.
Yeah, and developing secure finances can only happen on the basis of relationships.
Yeah.
And so that's another overlap with heart. And I think somebody, maybe it was Roland, said in one of our meetings, like the risk is that as happens in our culture, that the head gets too disconnected from the rest of the organism. And also came to mind that, like, traditionally in our society, this is like the asshole, like the nope, it's not going to work without this. And maybe there's a way to embrace that in a positive way. Like we were talking in our meeting about, like, this is foundational, like root chakra. Like without the money and the legal stuff, all the other dreams and aspirations and incredible, wonderful energy and motion don't have a.
Yeah, and how we do it is kind of informed by, the other guilds and principles and everything, but we have to. This is something we have to do. We can't just nerd away on it intellectually or conceptually. We need to make the money. We need to buy the land. It's like how we create relationships as we do that, and who we look to in terms of partners as far as the principles are concerned. That's all really important. But it's definitely, if we don't do it, then we don't have certainly we don't have a place here on this land. I mean, we may still have a Lifeboat Academy, but I think we're moving towards really wanting to be here concretely on this land.
There's also a piece in here about, sorry about that, a piece about how it's done is also part of the, like, co-creating the new ways of navigating in these realms of finance and the legal industry and the financial industry. And so being really rooted in that the foundation of the commitment or the agreement or the consent, all of those things, to actually not just move from muscle memory, to have that to be cutting that new ground and figuring it out and creating it and then doing it and then demonstrating it and modeling it is also an element of this particular guild in the way that I connect with it.
And also navigating the tensions in there of like the yes is, can we find a yes and where we're moving towards the life-giving generative new ways of being while we have to use the structures of the existing society.
Yeah. And it's kind of like it comes up all the time in the work that I do all the time, is that if we're just focused on money, we can make really bad mistakes in terms of relationships if we don't know that that's very linked, very closely together. So we're not just looking for money anywhere so that we can achieve the purchase of land. We're looking for allies who believe in what we're doing and where that is reciprocal. Because where they may be bringing their financial support is where they feel that they are, it's mutually beneficial to them, not because they get a lot of interest on it, but this is their hard work as well. And determining that, analyzing that, trying to figure out if that's true, that's the work of this group.
And I think that this is a great example of the overlap, because I would say that the Brain Guild is the most dangerous one, because, and this is where, and I can't remember the names of all the ones. I remember the body parts that they're associated with. So it's actually really closely associated with the Tentacles Guild. It's more dangerous than the Tentacles Guild because, like Barbara was saying, there's muscle memory as a sort of a metaphor for going, following old neural pathways. It needs to be guided by the hard work and by the governance guilds. And I'm just glad to see, I'm pretty sure that the members of the Finance and the Legal Guild are also representative of, also have members who are part of the hard work and governance and tentacles guilds. Yeah, so I think that this is actually a really good example of where there's overlap, and I feel like it's the place where we could most easily lose our way. So working together and having people from the other guilds on it, I think is great. That's it for me.
I'm going to chime in on that because I think it's the most dangerous, and it's also possibly the most radical or impactful. Because I think if we can get this right, if we can figure out how to create a fair way of tracking contributions and balancing the energy flow that goes beyond dollars, and we're really creating a space where people are fairly compensated for their contributions. And we can figure out a model. I mean, and it's a big ask, and I agree, it's dangerous, and there's no guarantee that we'll get that right. Lots of people are working on this, and so far no one's really cracked the nut. But so yeah, there with danger comes potential as well. So over to you, Linda.
Yeah, I guess you kind of hit on it at the end. I was wondering how far you've gone in this direction, and is there any place I could find how far you've gone? And then the other question is, I'm assuming on your website now that you're going to list meetings. So, if I have an interest, for instance, in how you're going to structure the finance and legal system for the Lifeboat Academy, I'm assuming I can join the meeting and become, in other words, these are not limited to just certain people, so we can all kind of contribute to these areas.
Totally.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, principle number one is anyone affected by a decision has has the right to shape that decision.
Right.
So yeah, absolutely. Anyone who has an interest and it's also welcoming perspectives, right? That knowing that the work of any group is stronger, the more perspectives that we can take in and integrate into that process. So yeah, definitely. Cool. And we can talk a little bit about like I can give you an update on where
You are.
things stand there. Barbara, over to you.
Thanks. There's also some movement toward or expression of interest in documenting the processes and the information in a it's available now inside Ben's, from direct, touching on with Ben's brain and Roland's brain and some general information sheets basically. And I'm quite interested in sort of mapping out some more of the detail. In the draft plan here. It's produce, can't quite read it, something basically pitch packages that do spell out some of the detail for people who are interested in a little more of that, the shape of it. And in the doing of that, just making those kinds of procedural or descriptive items for people. It also really helps clarify some of that and kind of exposes where, well, how does that actually work? Oh, there's a bit of a gap here. So that's also an element that I'm looking forward to.
Well, and I will say one of our mottos here is we probably have that written down somewhere. So there is very little or no information that is in my brain that is not written down. So
Fabulous.
the challenge has been that there's so much detail that has gone into so many aspects of this that we can't present it in a way that doesn't freak people out. So we've actually tried, there's a deep substrata of, for any one of these things, there are spreadsheets and documents that describe the theory and the process and et cetera, et cetera. So it's a lot of getting people up to speed on what's already there. And we've tried to keep breadcrumbs, so you can follow links and get to the greater detail, which is not to say the stuff that's detailed is good or complete, or, it's all meant in the spirit of kind of creating a template that then people can play with. What happens if we change this number? What happens if we change that element? So yeah, it's about making sure that those are findable and that the right level of information is, available to present in different forms. So there's a lot of background information that is available. It's about figuring out how to weave it together to tell the story in a coherent way and for the right people at the right time,
Balancing curiosity with overwhelm.
Yeah, and it's
Pretty
a
much.
really hard target to hit.
Yeah,
So,
I get that.
I am aware of time, and I just want to make sure that I think it's a really rich and useful conversation, and I just want to make sure that we're kind of moving through it and not getting stalled. So I'm just going to say, let's go over to the Farm Food and Housing Guild, and then we can come back and continue that conversation, and that's also what this afternoon's about. So, but let's just make sure that we make sure that everyone's up to speed on each of the guilds. So Farm, Food, and Housing, anyone want to speak to this guild and the meeting that we had?
I can
Roland?
start. It looks like a really big guild. There's a lot of pieces and parts that we can readily identify. But essentially, at the meeting, we agreed that this was a baseline year. There are elements that are really important to us and that actually fit into the way that we've developed the structure, not only of the place, but of the buying of the property. So being able to set up where not only where we start, but how do we document what we do, and in such a way where we're documenting, we have a methodology for the experimenting so that we can then report on results from what we've done. So one of the first tasks is where do we want to start in developing the place? And then how do we want to do it? What's the order? How do we want to document it? And how do we want to report on it? And I can't quite read. It's very small on my screen.
Nope.
Yeah. Yeah. I think probably that is probably it in a nutshell. There's another reason for baseline is that the property hasn't really been farmed in a very long time. And the farming that was happening on this portion of the property was likely very simple. It was probably used mainly for haying, maybe for some grazing at some point. I mean, it has been recently. There's a neighbor that was using it for horses, and that's right. The expression is that we're going for the plaid before going for the chiffon, and I have to thank Barbara for that that analogy. So we're going for the functional stuff. For example, in terms of food production, we're going for the calorie-rich, easy to grow, immediate things before going into refined. And even I think Barbara was talking about what are the plaid medicinal plants that we can start with. And that is also to work with natural cycles so that we can start to learn and understand how the property works and how it wants to interact with us. So I think that's all I have to say. Would anyone else like to chime in?
Yeah, I'll come in also. This one is really the hands-on guild, and it's like the doing guild. Lots of doing in this guild. There's guilds inside this guild, apparently, that I'm not personally hands-on familiar with, and I know that they exist. So I want to point at that there's lots and lots of doing, and that all of this sits on the land. Like there's the land underwrites all of this, and so deep bow to the land. And the other thing I want to touch in is with this guild, the recognition that this guild is kind of the keeper of how we touch the land and how the land touches us. And that just kind of cycles back to that thing about the land underwrites all of this. It's almost like it's primary.
Mhm.
So it's about how it's land keeping, farm keeping, like tending, stewarding, caring for, and being cared for, and that the cycle of nurturance that happens there. I'm done.
I want to build on that, and it sort of reminds me of the conversation around the finance stuff, where in a sense there's the danger of thinking this is about how much food we can grow, and even though how much food we grow is a really important motivation, it's really almost an excuse for people to work shoulder to shoulder in connection with in the dialogue with the land. So all of that heart work stuff and principle stuff that we were talking about, all that transformation happens because people are going to come and plant stuff or tend stuff or build stuff. And so I think it's also keeping that spirit in it. And likewise with the experiments, it could be, picking the experiments where it makes sense to start and letting them take on a life of their own, not feeling like, not pushing rope, so creating the opportunities, and making smart choices and letting that be the invitation rather than thinking it's about how many pounds of this, it's the both and, because, we also want to be, we want to be aware of the pounds of, edible food, but doing it in a way where it's inviting people to that experience of like, it isn't just about the gardening, it's about the connection with the land and the carbon cycle, that whole cycle. So anyone else? Barbara, back to you.
Unmuted here. I just wanted to make sure that we understand that plaid is sexy.
No, that's true. And I think that this is a really good example, Ben, of the and plus, yes, and plus. It's like, this is not where we're making choices. We may have to make choices in the what do you call it? On the granular level about what variety and all that kind of thing. But generally speaking, we can do it all. And maybe just the timing of it is the critical thing. What do we do immediately? What do we do for perennial long-term, And as I listen to you, I think, oh, wow, can I join that committee and give someone else the finance committee? And of course, I'm not going to, because I'm not on the land, but that's where I have my heart and my energy and my imagination, in the rolling out of how do we relate to the land as food provisioner, as a food provisioner.
Well, and that makes me think of balancing the buckets, which is something we talk about a lot. And one of the things I am discovering about the advantage of an agrarian lifestyle is, there's an old expression, a change is as good as a break. And, having a bunch of little things like, we could make a choice to have a huge market garden with a ton of different things and then not have time for anything else. Or we could have a small market garden and a small trial plot of mushrooms, but it's about figuring out what that right mix is, where it feels like you're going from joyful thing to joyful thing, curious thing to curious thing, and not that, oh my God, there's so much to do, and balancing that and bringing it back to a diet, it's like, do we have enough calories? Do we have enough sweet? Do we have enough, anyhow, yes. Any other comments on the farm food and housing? All right, then going on to the last guild, outreach and network. Who would like to start us off with some contributions?
I can start. So the Outreach Guild is the one that Roland referred to as the Tentacles Guild. And we've also been talking about it as the Mycelia Guild. I really like the mycelium or mycelia metaphor because it's also about how information moves from the Lifeboat Academy into the Lifeboat Network, into the, through the whole world, and then how does information come back as well. So those two-way highways that connect us to everything else. And what came up in our guild meeting was really leaning into relationality, which if you've been following along with us over the past year, that's been our big thing, relational networking. But really leaning into our relationships as much as possible, and also leaning into relationships as the way that we bring people in and meet people and get to know people. One of the things or a couple things we talked about is the human library aspect of community, and really looking at a network of people as we have all of these different resources and knowledge and skills among us, and can we design spaces where we can all come together and kind of pick each other's brains and see, you know, what resources are available from the group based on what people need. So finding ways to make people's assets really available to each other. And there were a few different ideas about how we can do that. And we also talked about mentorship and how, you know, how is the Lifeboat Academy and the Lifeboat Network different from other resources online, which are often more just kind of like an encyclopedia. You know, people kind of present all of this information at once to people, and it's like, okay, but I'm, you know, I'm a living, breathing person concerned about collapse. Where do I start? So I had the idea about lifeboat mentors or anyone in the network being offering basically like a pressure release valve. So when someone contacts us for the first time, they could have, you know, a pretty immediate one-on-one with an actual living person to have a conversation and just express what's up for them. What are they concerned about? What are they feeling alarmed about? What do they want? What kind of action might they want to take? So we're really providing like a relational experience for folks. And that's kind of their entry point into the Lifeboat Network. So it's not just looking at the help desk, which has lots of great resources, but actually talking to a person about how to use the help desk or what specific tools on the help desk would be appropriate based on what we're hearing from them. So providing a lot of support that way, and looking at the Lifeboat Network as a learning network, a place for creative inquiry and leaning into our collective intelligence, kind of that human library idea again. So even though we have, you know, this guild does a lot on social media and MailChimp and email and all of this kind of like flat, you know, 2D technical stuff, still keeping it really alive and lively and animated through our relationships. And that also includes, you know, the navigation circles and lifeboat circles, and inviting people who have been in the network longer to start taking on more of those kinds of events. You know, we have lots of people who've come to navigation sessions regularly. And one of the actions we could take is starting to invite people to shadow a facilitator and then learn how to facilitate those events for the network, and for anyone else who might be interested in attending. So leaning into the nodes of the network to hold more of the space for our collective intelligence to exist and be accessed. And we also, as part of this whole process, we talked about reviewing all of these tools that I've been mentioning. You know, what do we have at our disposal? What can we lean into more? Just so we're all kind of aware of what's already been developed and what works, what has shown to work well. So that's my spiel. Anyone have anything to add?
I've got a couple things to add. One is that my work for lots of years has been around what's an effective self-organizing network. And then when you network the networks, what happens? So obviously you can see that I'm entranced by some of the bare bones of this system of development. And also understanding networks of networks as social movements with the capacity to do big change, big sustainable change. So that's what I think is partly being harnessed here. Thanks.
Sandra, over to you. Sandra?
I'll lower my hand first. Yeah, I like Ronnie's metaphor of mycelial network and also mycorrhizal network, the rhizomes and rhizomatic thinking, where you kind of like the networks moving outwards, but then growth is popping up and still, you know, accessing the nutrients from the older source of that particular plant or being. And then I was going to speak up for the farm and the practical stuff, and I realized, oh yeah, no, that fits here too in terms of networking, about having. I'm sure you did this last year, so you'll do it again, is to have work parties, regular work parties where people can come and help learn and work at the same time. And then possible workshops that provide learning opportunities as well as move forward the work. And I'm really interested in supporting that aspect of the organization and operation, and connecting the networking to the farm operation to pull in learning opportunities for the community and building those skills, and then what that looks like. And this is probably not the time. It probably comes in the afternoon, maybe, is when, like, I have a connection with the elder Della Rice Sylvester, and I just had this vision of her coming for a weekend when the nettles are going well and doing a workshop on the wild crafting and processing of nettles. So anyway, just wanted to share it because it came up.
Awesome, cool. And I feel like there's some that makes me excited that we're starting to get pulled into that level. So that's awesome. Does anyone else have anything that they want to add about the outreach and networking? Oh, go ahead, Linda.
Yeah, I guess it's almost like my other question. I think because I'm so new to this, I don't get a sense of like, well, who's doing it? This is great. I mean, this is all really well thought through, and I don't understand how there's few of us, so I don't understand how this is all going to happen, and perhaps that's just because of me just dropping in really for the first time here. And now all of a sudden I'm feeling the overwhelm. So there's a lot here though, and I really see this outreach, offering webinars, navigation sessions, lifeboat circles, etc., being really cool and important. And I want to be involved with that too. So I that's where I get a little bit confused as to who's in what guild and how do we actually populate these activities that are being suggested by the guild work.
I have sort of a two-part answer, and also it is not a complete answer because I don't think any answer is ever complete. But the first part is a lot of this stuff is actually already ongoing. So we do have one ongoing navigation session currently every 2 weeks. We also have social media outreach and MailChimp outreach and email stuff that's ongoing. We have a client relationship management software that's set up. It's set up. We don't use it a whole lot, but it's there. The help desk and the website. So a lot of this has been building over time, and folks of us who've been sort of in the core team are already holding of it. So that was the first part. The second part is hoping to populate the guild more over time. I've been holding like the weekly email that goes out and social media posts that are correlated with it. And that's something I would, like to be able to at least share with at least one other person sometime in the future. And Roland also does a lot of, creates a lot of content and posts on social media very, very regularly. So there's a lot of like badges that could be earned by shadowing these different activities. But yeah, ultimately it's about growing the guild, sharing, what's already in place, and slowly recruiting folks to shadow and take on different parts. And that is also just how you participate in the Lifeboat network. If you've been coming to navigation sessions, maybe you can start to facilitate them. We could get lifeboat circles up and running again. They're really actually very simple to facilitate. So it's really a matter of leaning into our existing relationships to be like, okay, would you actually be willing to take on something, once a month or twice a month? To start spreading the work out more, because I agree there's a lot here, and there's been a few of us holding quite a lot of it. So, and because of that, things have fallen to the wayside that we'd like to do all of the things all the time, but we just need more people to do it. So,
Mhm. And
but yeah,
I-
so further guild meetings, we will be going more in depth about who can do what and who can start shadowing whom and stuff like that. Sorry,
Yeah.
Ben.
No, and no, I would continue on that because we've set it up so that I mean, we've been thoughtful about what does relational work mean and what does it mean to be a peer-to-peer network, and what does balanced energy flow mean, which is, recognizing that, and also I think, so putting that all together, we know that creating these opportunities, the outreach opportunities for people to show up at a work party, for people to attend a navigation session, or to we have a whole bunch of webinars that we can easily host, with all the materials are there. And so, and we also know that we're tapping into people that are already networked. So the process is kind of creating the opportunities where people can come and experience it, have that first taste, because we know I think I've come to an understanding that we'll never be able to verbally describe what we're talking about in promotional materials. That because the people that we want to reach are people that are looking to transform themselves in a direction. So we're already on sort of the far side of the experience. And people who are, at the beginning part of that experience, they don't know what they haven't experienced yet. So we can't really introduce them to it, or we can't describe it, but we can hold their hand and bring them into that experience. And I think that's, Ronnie, with your idea of the mentoring, I'm having a bunch of things come together. So and also my third coffee. So that mentoring part of, no matter who reaches out, and all they have to say is, I am freaked out, I'm overwhelmed, I'm frustrated, I'm scared, I don't know what. I'm hopeful, I'm whatever, I'm motivated, whatever. When we talk to them, we collectively have a wide range of understanding of the landscape that people are traveling in. And so I know what it's like to be in that questioning, are things really that bad? And then, oh, no, things are really that bad. Now what? Or, well, okay, I'm going to try this. And I've been through those experiences, so I know that there's a trajectory. And that's being able to let the person sort of just say blah. And maybe they're just focused on practical issues. Maybe they just want to know what to plant, or maybe they just want to know how to talk to their neighbors, or maybe they want to know how to process their grief. Those are all legitimate places to be, and we can help with all of them. But it's a matter of oh, you're interested in permaculture. Here, let me connect you. Oh, you want to have your first, neighborhood meeting. Here, I know how to help that. Here's where you can go. And then once you identify where they are and offer that support, then the balanced energy flow it's pay it forward. So, we reached out and gave you a hand. If that was useful, are you willing to now, reach out in another way? And how does it fit? And, some people might want to host navigation sessions for their people, not for, not for the Lifeboat network, but just, oh, this is a great process and my friends could really use it. Cool. It's like, get the tool out there. And so anyhow, I think it's a longer, less concise version of what Ronnie was saying, but it's like meeting people where they are, offering the support that we think they are asking for, and then creating an opportunity for them to pay that forward. So, there's that expression, everyone reaches behind them, right? Everyone, you reach out and you get a hand, and you reach back and you lend a hand. And so that model is how we have it set up scalably, so that with the navigation sessions or the webinars, or there's a bunch of things where the more people who are interested, the more we offer, and we just scale up based on how much interest there is. Anyhow, I feel like I'm excited because that question triggered, right, this is how this works, is we meet people where they are, and we provide the support, and then we create the opportunity for them to offer what feels right. So
I just
uh,
want to riff off that very quickly. And because that's basically Foodlands is very parallel to what's happening with Lifeboat. And our membership is 60% community farms that operate as community commons in various different ways. And I am paying it forward with Lifeboat. And if it's useful, the participation that I am doing here with Lifeboat, then I'm asking for some return. And Ben has interested in being part of our, we call the Outreach and Membership Committee, but now we're calling it the Network Committee. And so just basically, there's nothing more that he would have to do or Lifeboat would have to do, but just bring your experience to our group, which is already a network.
Mhm.
So like
Yeah.
when you're talking about networks within networks, and you know, I would really love, April, to have a conversation with you and others about networking itself. And because I basically see Foodlands as a network. So it's connecting our members with all of the resources and with the people. And Lifeboat's really key on that. But there's also all kinds of other experiments that could be considered, I think, by Lifeboat as being lifeboats.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
So let's play together.
Yeah. Yep. And the fluidity of the connections, you know, that 6 degrees of separation idea, you know, if Heather, like if Foodlands and the Lifeboat Academy maintain that connection, and that means we're connected to not only Heather, who is already connected to, you know, a ton of farms and a ton of people that have been working with farmland, farm folk, city folk, and young agrarians, and you know, that whole web where this happens all the time. We talk about something and Heather says, oh, let me introduce you to so and so. You know, I worked with them on this project, and vice versa. You know, now the farms that are coming in through Heather, we're connected to Deep Adaptation Network and to Earth Regenerators, and you know, so all of a sudden now, with one contact, you have access to all of those resources. And if we can figure out how to leverage, you know, how do I ask my friends, you know, if I get a question in from Foodlands and I can activate the Lifeboat network, who knows about X? Then, you know, just that flow of resources, you know, we can have a global reach really quickly without any AI intelligence required, you know, just with plain old human intelligence. Roland. Oh, you're muted.
Thank you. I'm looking at the time. I'm not sure when the cutoff is supposed to be, but this sounds like what would you call it, a coffee conversation? Or so if anyone wants to continue the conversation, then can we keep the lines, maybe stop the recording and keep the line open, or the room open or whatever, and we can come in and out. And at what time are we reconvening?
Yeah.
And in the meantime, we can just leave the channel open.
And this is a great example of we're all circle keepers. So thanks, Roland, for pulling me back. And yeah, we are past time. And this is a conversation that naturally is designed to continue when we come back together at 2 o'clock, where we talk about how do we coordinate ourselves and how does that coordination work happen? And how do we, and not only the coordination, but also then how do we build the guild's capacity to do this? So I think this is a great call. And just I'll open it up to any last thoughts for the good of the cause, and then we'll feel free to go and have your lunch and join us back here at 2 Pacific, and we'll continue the conversation. So any last thoughts before we break up? All right. Oh,
Well,
Linda.
you want us all here, right? This isn't, I mean, there isn't a separate coordinators circle.
No, right. All back into the same room, back for the coordination at 2 o'clock.
Cool.
Alrighty, see you then. And we'll leave this open, but if you go to lunch, go.